Hey there, I'm Carl. I've been a local newspaper columnist in this city for over 30 years, and let me tell you, I've seen it all. From heartwarming tales of community heroes to shocking scandals that rocked our town to its core. I've covered everything from the Great Flood of '95 to that time the mayor's dog won the annual hot dog eating contest. But I don't just write any old story. I've got a nose for the ones that really matter, the ones with lessons that stick with you long after you've finished reading. Now, let me tell you about a story that'll make your jaw drop. It's called Racist Thugs Mocked the Garbage Man. Their jaws dropped when they found out. Astonished face, this tale I'm about to share? It's a doozy that'll make you think twice about judging a book by its cover. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let me fill you in on what went down. Trust me, you won't want to miss this one. The group of young troublemakers stood frozen, their mouths hanging open in shock. The garbage man they'd been mocking just minutes ago wasn't just any sanitation worker. He was Dr. Marcus Thompson, one of the most respected neurosurgeons in the country. Before they could even stutter an apology, police sirens wailed in the distance. The look of shame on their faces said it all, but what happened next would change their lives forever. Let me take you back to where it all began. Marcus Thompson had always been different from your typical doctor. Despite his successful career saving lives in the operating room, he spent his Saturday mornings doing something unusual, collecting garbage in the poorest neighborhoods of our city. It started 3 years ago when Marcus learned about the sanitation worker shortage in low-income areas. Instead of just writing a check, he decided to get his hands dirty, literally. Every weekend, he'd wake up at 4 a.m., put on a standard garbage collector's uniform, and help keep these struggling neighborhoods clean. Nobody knew who he really was, and that's exactly how he wanted it. It's not about recognition, he once told me. It's about doing what's right. But everything changed that fateful Saturday morning when a group of privileged college students, led by a troublemaker named Brad Wilson, spotted Marcus doing his rounds. They'd been driving around in Brad's expensive convertible, looking for what they called entertainment. When they saw Marcus, a black man in a sanitation worker's uniform, they thought they'd found their target. They started following his garbage truck, shouting racial slurs and recording videos on their phones. "Hey trash man, picking up garbage where you belong?" Brad yelled, while his friends laughed and honked the horn. Marcus kept his cool, continuing his work with dignity. But then Brad crossed a line that would set off a chain of events nobody saw coming. He threw an empty beer can at Marcus, hitting him in the back of the head. What happened in the next few minutes would not only expose their racism, but teach them a lesson they'd never forget. The beer can hit Marcus with a sharp thud. Instead of reacting with anger, he calmly picked up the can, placed it in his recycling bin, and pulled out his phone. What Brad and his friends didn't know was that Marcus had been recording their harassment the entire time, something he'd learned to do after years of dealing with similar incidents. But that wasn't the only surprise waiting for these troublemakers. Just as Brad was getting ready to throw another can, a police cruiser turned the corner. Officer Sarah Martinez had been patrolling nearby and witnessed the whole incident. She'd also recognized Marcus immediately. After all, he had saved her mother's life during an emergency brain surgery just last month. "Is there a problem here, Dr. Thompson?" Officer Martinez called out, putting extra emphasis on the doctor. The look on Brad and his friends' faces was priceless. Their smug grins disappeared faster than ice cream on a hot summer day. "Dr. Thompson." Brad stuttered, his face turning pale. "As in, Dr. Marcus Thompson? The neurosurgeon?" Marcus simply nodded, still maintaining his composure. "The same one who operated on your father last year, Mr. Wilson. I recognize you from the hospital waiting room." The silence that followed was deafening. Brad's friends started backing away from him, suddenly remembering urgent appointments elsewhere. But Brad stood frozen, remembering the skilled surgeon who had spent 12 hours removing a tumor from his father's brain, the same man he just hit with a beer can. Officer Martinez stepped out of her cruiser, notebook in hand. "Would you like to press charges, Dr. Thompson? I've got the whole incident on my dash cam." Marcus looked at the group of young men, now pale and trembling. He could see the fear in their eyes, fear of arrest, fear of ruining their futures, fear of their parents finding out. But instead of saying yes, he did something that would shock everyone present. "I have a better idea," Marcus said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a stack of papers that would change these young men's lives forever. But before he could explain his plan, Brad did something nobody expected, something that would force Officer Martinez to draw her weapon. Brad, in a moment of panic and misplaced anger, lunged toward Marcus. "You set us up," he shouted. Officer Martinez drew her weapon instantly, ordering Brad to freeze. The other young men scattered like leaves in the wind, leaving their friend to face the consequences alone. "On your knees, hands behind your head," Officer Martinez commanded. Brad, finally realizing the gravity of his situation, dropped to his knees on the dirty sidewalk. His designer jeans soaked up the morning dew as tears began streaming down his face. "Please," Brad whimpered, "my dad will kill me if I get arrested. Our family's reputation." Marcus raised his hand, signaling Officer Martinez to wait. He walked over to Brad, still holding those mysterious papers. "Son, I'm not interested in ruining your life. I'm interested in changing it." The papers in Marcus's hand turned out to be volunteer applications for the city's community service program. He'd been carrying them for weeks, waiting for the right moment. "I work these routes because I believe in dignity of all work and the importance of giving back," Marcus explained. "I think you boys need to learn the same lesson." Officer Martinez lowered her weapon but kept her hand close to it. She'd seen too many situations go bad to completely let her guard down. But something in Marcus's voice seemed to be getting through to Brad. "Instead of pressing charges," Marcus continued, "I'm offering you and your friends a choice. Spend 6 months working alongside me every Saturday morning, cleaning up these neighborhoods, or face the legal consequences of your actions." Brad looked up, his face a mix of shame and disbelief. "Every Saturday? For 6 months?" "Every Saturday," Marcus confirmed. "And you'll need to convince your friends to join you. All of you or none of you. This is about learning to work together, regardless of our differences." Just then, Brad's phone started buzzing. His father was calling, probably wondering why his son's location had been tagged in a police incident report. But before Brad could answer, something even more unexpected happened that would test everyone's commitment to this unusual arrangement. A news van from Channel 5 came screeching around the corner. Someone had tipped them off about the incident, and now cameras were rolling. The reporter, Jessica Collins, practically jumped out of the van with her microphone ready. Brad's face went from pale to ghost white. This was about to become breaking news. "Dr. Thompson, we received reports of a racial incident involving you. Can you comment?" Jessica thrust her microphone forward while her cameraman zoomed in on Brad's tear-stained face. Marcus stepped in front of Brad, blocking the camera's view. What he did next would not only shock the reporters, but would teach everyone watching a powerful lesson about forgiveness and redemption. "There's no story here," Marcus said firmly. "Just a teachable moment between neighbors. This young man and his friends are about to begin a community service project with me. We'll be working together to keep our neighborhoods clean." Brad stared at Marcus in disbelief. Not only was this man he just assaulted protecting him from public shame, but he was also trying to turn this ugly incident into something positive. The reporter wasn't satisfied. "But Dr. Thompson, we have reports of racial slurs being used, objects being thrown dash." "What we have," Marcus interrupted, "is an opportunity to show the city how people can learn from their mistakes and grow together. That's the only story worth telling here." Officer Martinez, following Marcus's lead, put away her ticket book. But she had one condition: "I want bodycam footage of every Saturday session. For everyone's protection." As the news crew reluctantly packed up their gear, Brad's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a group text from his friends. They'd been watching the live news feed and had seen everything. Their messages would reveal whether Marcus's unusual plan had any chance of success. But before Brad could read them, a black SUV came speeding down the street. Inside was someone none of them expected to see, someone whose arrival would completely change the dynamics of this already tense situation. The black SUV screeched to a halt, and out stepped Richard Wilson, Brad's father. The same man whose life Marcus had saved just last year. Richard's face was a storm of emotions as he surveyed the scene, his son on his knees, a police officer nearby, news reporters packing up their gear, and the surgeon who had removed his brain tumor wearing a garbage collector's uniform. "What in God's name is going on here?" Richard bellowed, his voice echoing off the surrounding buildings. He'd seen part of the live news feed and rushed over immediately. Before anyone could answer, Brad's phone buzzed one last time. With trembling hands, he read the group messages from his friends. One by one, they were agreeing to Marcus's proposal, not out of fear of legal consequences, but because they'd watched the live broadcast and seen how Marcus had handled the situation. Richard marched over to where Brad knelt, but Marcus stepped between them. "Mr. Wilson," he said calmly, "your son has already agreed to make amends. He and his friends will be joining me every Saturday morning for the next 6 months, learning about community service and respect." Richard looked at Marcus, then at his son, then back at Marcus. "You're showing him mercy? After what he did?" His voice cracked with emotion. "The same mercy you showed me when I needed emergency surgery, and you operated even though my insurance hadn't cleared?" The revelation hit Brad like a truck. He hadn't known about his father's insurance situation, just another example of Marcus's quiet generosity. But just as this moment of understanding dawned, a commotion from down the street threatened to undo everything Marcus had worked to achieve. 3 of Brad's friends had returned, but they weren't alone. They'd brought their parents too, and not everyone agreed with Marcus's peaceful solution. What happened next would test everyone's commitment to forgiveness and change. A heated argument erupted as parents took opposing sides. Some demanded their children face legal consequences to learn a real lesson, while others wanted to sweep the whole incident under the rug. The peaceful resolution Marcus had crafted was hanging by a thread. "My son will not be picking up garbage," shouted Karen Matthews, mother of one of Brad's friends. "Do you know who we are in this community?" "That's exactly the problem," Richard Wilson suddenly spoke up, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We've been teaching our kids that they're somehow better than others because of our money, our status." He turned to face the other parents. "And look what that's turned them into." The street fell silent. Richard Wilson, one of the most prominent business leaders in the city, was taking a stand that nobody expected. He walked over to Marcus's garbage truck, picked up a spare uniform vest, and put it on. "If my son is doing this program, I'm doing it too," he announced. "Every Saturday. Maybe it's time we parents learn something about humility as well." One by one, the kids started speaking up, surprising their parents. They'd watched the live news feed, seen how Marcus had protected them from public shame despite their horrible actions. They wanted to be part of his program, not because they had to, but because they were starting to understand why they should. But just as it seemed everything was settling down, Karen Matthews made a phone call that would throw one final challenge into the mix. Within minutes, a sleek town car pulled up, and out stepped Mayor Williams himself. His presence would either destroy Marcus's careful plan for redemption or cement it in a way no one could have predicted. The arrival of Mayor Williams sent a ripple of tension through the crowd. He was known for his tough stance on crime and his zero-tolerance policy for any behavior that tarnished the city's image. Everyone held their breath, wondering if he would support Marcus's plan or throw the book at the young offenders. Mayor Williams surveyed the scene with a stern expression, his gaze lingering on the news van parked nearby. He approached Marcus, his voice booming with authority. "Dr. Thompson, I understand you've been assaulted. I want a full report of this incident." Marcus calmly explained the situation, emphasizing his desire for a restorative justice approach rather than punitive measures. He spoke about the importance of community service, the dignity of all work, and the opportunity for these young men to learn from their mistakes. Mayor Williams listened intently, his expression softening slightly. He glanced at the group of teenagers, their heads bowed in shame, and then at their parents, some still arguing amongst themselves. Finally, he turned back to Marcus. "Dr. Thompson," he said, "I commend your commitment to our city and your belief in second chances. However, actions have consequences." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "These young men have committed a serious offense," he continued, "one that cannot be ignored. But I also believe in the power of redemption." He looked at the teenagers, his gaze unwavering. "I propose a compromise," Mayor Williams announced. In addition to Dr. Thompson's community service program, these young men will participate in a city-sponsored youth mentorship program. They will be paired with successful professionals from diverse backgrounds, learning about different career paths and the importance of community involvement. A wave of relief washed over the crowd. The mayor's compromise was not only fair but also offered a valuable opportunity for the young offenders to turn their lives around. The parents, even Karen Matthews, nodded in agreement. "Furthermore," Mayor Williams continued, "I will be joining you on your Saturday morning rounds, Dr. Thompson. It's time I learned a thing or two about humility and service myself." The crowd erupted in cheers. The mayor's unexpected decision not only solidified the community service program, but also sent a powerful message about leadership and accountability. As the news cameras started rolling again, capturing this unexpected turn of events, Marcus smiled. His plan had worked, even better than he'd hoped. He had not only taught these young men a valuable lesson but had also inspired a community and its leader to embrace compassion and change. The Saturday morning garbage collection program became a local legend. The group of young men, initially resistant, grew to appreciate the value of their work and the camaraderie they found with Marcus and the other sanitation workers. They learned about the challenges faced by those less fortunate, the importance of respecting all professions, and the power of community. Richard Wilson, true to his word, joined them every week, his presence a constant reminder of the importance of leading by example. Mayor Williams also became a regular participant, his down-to-earth demeanor and willingness to learn earning him newfound respect from the community. The story of the garbage man who turned out to be a renowned neurosurgeon, the racist thugs who learned a life-changing lesson, and the mayor who joined them on their rounds became a symbol of hope and transformation in Oak Ridge. It showed that even the most divisive incidents could lead to unexpected unity and that redemption was possible for anyone willing to embrace it. And that's how a simple act of kindness turned into a movement for change in our city, folks. If you were inspired by this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Let's spread the message of compassion, forgiveness, and the power of second chances. Thanks for joining me on this journey, and until next time, remember that even in the messiest situations, there's always hope for a clean start.